In this video, we will create a reverse proxy using YARP that routes HTTP requests to two separate ASP.NET Core web APIs based on the request URL. This is a very common practice for web services to create a public service that combines multiple services in the background. The good news is that it is pretty easy to set up. Let's go. First, let me briefly illustrate what I have in mind. Suppose I have two separate web APIs that work independently of each other, a user API and a product API. Now let's say we have a front end, perhaps a React application, that wants to consume these APIs, a fairly common scenario. Problem with this architecture is that the client has to deal with two different services, so it has to know the URLs of both services. Imagine there are not just these two web APIs, but 5 or 6. The client would have to know about all of them. This is not very practical. Instead, it would be much easier for clients if there was only one API that provided the different endpoint methods. This is where reverse proxies can help. A reverse proxy is a separate service that takes all requests from clients and routes them to the correct web API. The client only communicates with this single service without having to know about all the web APIs in the background. So what we are going to build are these two APIs, a user API and a product API, and the reverse proxy. I will start with the user web API. I am creating a new web API with .NET 9, nothing special. Then I remove all the weather forecast sample stuff. Instead, I create a new record called user, which contains an ID, a username, an email address, and the creation date. Then I create a get endpoint that returns a list of fake users. This should be enough for our example. Let's test it out. I start the project and in the browser I get the JSON data with the fake users. So far, so good. Now I do the same thing again, create a new web API for products, create a record that holds data for a product, and create a get endpoint that returns a list of fake products. Simple as that. Okay, so now we have our two web APIs. Now we want to set up a reverse proxy using YARP. To do this, I will create another ASP.NET Core Web API project, just like I did before. This time I will add a NuGet package called yarp.reverseProxy. Then I go to the app settings.json and add a new section called reverse proxy. This is where we configure our reverse proxy. There are two sections, routes and clusters. In the root section, we define two routes, one for user and one for product. In the first one, we basically say if there is an incoming request with a path starting with user, no matter what comes after it, then forward the request to this cluster, but first adjust the URL to get rid of the user/prefix. In the cluster section, we have clusters for user and product. Here I specify the URLs for both APIs. That's all the configuration we need here. Okay, let's go to the program CS of the proxy project. We can get rid of most of the stuff here. We need to call add reverse proxy and load from config, where we specify the reverse proxy section from app settings.json. Then we need to call app.map reverse proxy and we are done. To run this, we need to make sure that all three services are started. So here in Writer, I just create a multi-launch configuration that starts all three projects. Then I launch it and here we see that all three services are running. If I copy the URL from the proxy service, paste it into my browser and add /user at the end, we see we get the expected result. In the console output of the proxy service, there are log messages indicating that the request we just sent was forwarded to the correct service. So it works really well and we could use it for real projects. Maybe you want to set up your project with Docker and Docker Compose. Let's see what that would look like. I will create a Docker Compose file. Here I add three services for our three ASP.NET Core projects. For the proxy service, I bind port 7197 on my machine to 8080 in the container. For the other services, I don't expose the ports because they don't need to be accessible from outside the container. Then I make a small adjustment to the reverse proxy settings in app settings.json. I adjust the target URLs. It's HTTP users 8080 for the user service and HTTP products 8080 for the product service. We are using Docker's networking functionality here. And that's it. I just have to run docker compose up --build and off we go. The containers are running and I can check in the browser to see if it works. Awesome. So we successfully built a reverse proxy. We could extend the setup to have multiple instances of our product service or the user service with YARP acting as a load balancer, but that is beyond the scope of this video. That's it for this video. If you want to learn how to build an AI chatbot with Ollama and .NET Aspire, watch this video next. Thanks for watching. Bye.